So I've been, if you've been following along, then motherese has all these really great properties for helping children learn language. And it turns out that child-directed speech, motherese, right, infant-directed speech, these are sort of the same kind of different names for the same thing. That kind of speech scaffolds lots of important knowledge, right? So not just language knowledge, but listening to this kind of speech promotes babies' acquisition of fundamental cognitive and social capacities that form the foundation for subsequent learning. For example, noticing patterns or regularities among sounds, it's a language property, or objects, right? Just patterns in objects. Recognizing partners with whom they can communicate, that's a social component. Establishing coherent categories of objects and events, that's a conceptual kind of thing that children are able to better do when they get this kind of child-directed speech. And it turns out that motherese can actually help jumpstart the language parts of the brain, because in fact, just 24 hours after birth, the sound of a mother's voice specifically activates the language processing and motor circuits of the brain, more so even than another female voice, right? It's really jumpstarting neurobiologically the language foundation of a baby's brain. And it turns out, looking again sort of further down the line, that children who attend daycare centers that have more one-on-one contact with an adult, right, so they're getting more of that child-directed speech signal, well, guess what? They acquire language more rapidly than children who get less one-on-one adult in-person contact. And then here's another thing, actually, for those of you with siblings. So older children who, guess what, receive all of their parents' child-directed speech before they have siblings, generally develop language earlier than later born children who have to share it, right, with the siblings, right? So the quantity of the motherese that you're getting really seems to have an impact on how quickly you develop different types of linguistic knowledge. And in fact, you can do interventions. So parents who are coached to use more motherese with their 6 and 10-month-olds, right? So babies under a year old who aren't saying anything yet, but sure are listening, right? These parents used more motherese, and they ended up with 14-month-olds who produce significantly more words than your average 14-month-old, right? So it's a very early use of more motherese has a very demonstrable and immediate effect just 8 months down the line. And then getting a little bit older, so 21-month-old, so just under 2 years. Well, guess what? They learn new words better from child-directed speech as compared to adult-directed speech, right? Like, so if you speak to them using child-directed speech and you teach them a new word, they'll learn better than if you're just doing it with normal adult-directed speech, right? And guess what? That's very important. And so just to really drive this home, it does seem to be that there's something special about words specifically directed at children, right? Whether it's a social engagement component, so their attention is really grabbed, or something else. But compared to words that children simply overhear, the overheard words just don't have the same impact, right? You just don't seem to pick up the words very much that you overhear until children are preschool age. I mean, you'll have the odd one that the kid will pick up that they'll overhear, usually curse words, much to their parents' chagrin, right? But, right, words that are simply overheard in sort of casual conversation, kids do not really pick these up until preschool age. So before preschool, before 4 or 5, right, they're really learning from that one-on-one, especially child-directed social interaction. Right. Now, it might also have to do with the relative complexity of the speech that they're overhearing, because overheard speech is actually much more complex than child-directed speech until children are 30 months old, just like 2.5, right? So, there's also the words you overhear are harder words than like kitty, right? Because maybe you're talking about going to the vet and giving them shots and driving on this, and these are harder words than kitty, right? So there are a lot of different factors, but the simple fact of the matter, the empirical thing that we know, words that are simply overheard don't have the same impact. They have much less impact on vocabulary acquisition, on learning new words until kids are 4 or 5.